Hi there, I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back to more Conversations in the Digital Age. Today we have a great show for you. Our subject is ISIS, the Islamic State that is dominating the news. With us is Graeme Wood. Graeme Wood is a journalist and a recognized authority on ISIS. He has written for The New Yorker, The American Scholar, The New Republic, Bloomberg, Businessweek, The Wall Street Journal, and the International Herald Tribune. He lectures at Yale University. He's presently the Edward R. Murrow Press Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, and his groundbreaking March 2015 article in The Atlantic entitled What ISIS Really Wants went viral around the world. It was the most read article in the history of The Atlantic. Graeme, we're delighted to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, tell us, what first sparked your interest in ISIS?
ISIS was, in a very interesting way, trying to sort of rewrite the script of terrorism as I had known it through my whole adult life. You know, I had known Al-Qaeda, I had read the writings and speeches of Osama bin Laden, and ISIS was clearly doing something very different, and it had a kind of intellectual enterprise to it that I thought was interesting and was really unreported on at that point. So I spent a long time reading their stuff, talking to their ideologues, and finding out what it is that they really want in their own words.
Now, did you travel to either Iraq or Syria to do your research?
I'd done that many times before, but the last time I was in Iraq, in territory that was controlled by ISIS, was in late 2012 in the city of Mosul. But they have a very energetic media department. They send out their encyclicals on a regular basis. And so actually to find out what they want, it would be nice to go there and interview their leaders, but actually you don't have to. So
did you go anywhere?
I did.
You weren't an armchair journalist. You just didn't sit in New York or Toronto and decide what you were going to write about.
No, I did go to several places around the world to meet with supporters of ISIS. But I have to say, these were fairly comfortable meetings. I could meet with a supporter of ISIS in Melbourne, Australia, in Tokyo, in Norway, in London, and just in a very comfortable way have a conversation over a cup of tea or coffee.
Let's talk about what ISIS is and what it isn't, and perhaps you could explain to our viewers what its origins have been.
So ISIS really originated in the group of jihadis associated with Al-Qaeda who were involved in resisting the American-led occupation of Iraq in the 2000s. They found that they were destroyed. They came very near destruction anyway because of the awakening in Iraq. And what they discovered was that after the Americans left and in the wake of the chaos of the Syrian civil war, they could kind of renew themselves, take a new strategy, and eventually create something greater than what they had ever hoped to achieve during their Al-Qaeda days. And that's what we see right now, is ISIS as the inheritor of that Al-Qaeda project.
So when did they proclaim the Islamic State?
They called themselves the Islamic State in Iraq at one point, then the Islamic State in Syria, or in Iraq and the Levant. And then finally, in June of 2014, they proclaimed themselves the Islamic State, or as they usually call themselves, or they often call themselves, the Caliphate, because they've revived this institution of the Caliphate, which by most measures has been gone since 1924.
Well, we'll certainly get into the Caliphate, but how many members do they have now?
We know that they've attracted foreign fighters in numbers probably approaching 30,000 at this point. That says nothing, though, about the number of men in arms they have from the local populations of Iraq and Syria. That's probably in the high tens of thousands, approaching 100,000 people. The number of people who actually live in Islamic State territory, on the other hand, is probably around 8 million, and that's just in the Syria-Iraq areas. It doesn't include the periphery.
How are they financed?
For a while, it was thought that they were financed through smuggled petroleum, and even some people thought antiquities. But increasingly it's been clear through some captured documents, through the work of researchers like Ayman al-Tamimi, that taxation is the main way that they get their money. They harvest funds from the local population, and they confiscate the wealth that's been left by people who have been displaced by them.
Now, do they have an organizational structure, a chairman, a president, a vice president?
Yes. So we've been able to see a kind of org chart for ISIS for some time. At the top of it is thought to be this one person, the caliph, whose name is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. And in the particular regions that they control, they have also emirs who are responsible for those places.
I think you divided the group at one time into three parts. It's almost like Caesar dividing Gaul, psychopaths and some others. Can you tell us what the three parts are?
Yeah, so the first and largest is the people who are simply subsumed by the Islamic State. The Islamic State shows up in a bunch of pickups, takes over their territory, and they have to live there. And these people are often conscripted. They often have no other option but to work for ISIS. And they are really Sunni pragmatists who are on ISIS's side. The second group is, as you say, the psychopaths. There are a lot of people who, especially in the early days, were attracted to ISIS because it gave them the chance to live out this kind of Mad Max fantasy with an Islamic inflection. They thought that they could go there and they could cut off heads, they could be the heroes of their own video games. And then there's the third group, which to my mind is the most interesting, which is the sort of intellectual supporters of ISIS, the true believers, I call them. And these people are the ones who really know ISIS's doctrine, who have, in some cases, a very sophisticated understanding of Islamic history and theology. And they make up, I think, an underappreciated part of ISIS. Some people have estimated them in the range of at least a fifth of the foreign fighters who have gone there.
Now, have they formed alliances with Islamic communities outside Iraq and Syria?
They have. They really have a our way or the highway kind of view of things. And so when they form alliances, it's in the following way. They say, if you wish to, you can give us allegiance, what they call bay'ah. And if you give the allegiance, then you will become part of the Islamic State. And your leader will be an emir rather than whatever he called himself before. And so, yes, they've been able to achieve that and expand through these pledges of allegiance into West Africa, into Libya, into Yemen, and in a few smaller other areas as well.
Now, they formed an alliance with Boko Haram, which mainly operates in Nigeria. So now is Nigeria going to be part of the caliphate?
Technically, it already is. When you look at the ISIS propaganda, they recently issued a new geography textbook to their students. And sure enough, you can see a world map with little glowing areas, and one of them is Nigeria.
Do you consider ISIS to be a threat to the United States?
I think the threat posed by ISIS is different from the one that we're used to from other terrorist groups. There's no question that ISIS would be thrilled to attack the United States, to conquer the United States, and in its propaganda, it actually makes a big deal of burning down the White House, of killing many people.
Well, I heard flying the flag of Allah over the White House.
Yes, maybe they'll do that first and
before
then
burn it down.
But that is really something that I think is a bit misleading. What ISIS really wants to do is to survive. They want to make sure that they can build a state in place in the territories that they control. And I think that they're aware that if they did try to burn down the White House or even perpetrate a September 11 style attack, there would be a really significant risk of blowback to them. That is, there would be retaliation, and it would be so strong that they would actually lose the territories that they currently control. So in some ways, I think ISIS might prefer not to have attacks of that size. It doesn't mean they don't plan to have attacks like that. It doesn't mean they wouldn't change their tack and perpetrate attacks like that if they started to lose territory in their core territories. But Al-Qaeda's strategy was to attack us at the Twin Towers in our subway systems. And ISIS, I think, is viewing that as a kind of failed way of doing business. They want to try something else.
What is their relationship with Al-Qaeda? They were an outgrowth or a splinter group of Al-Qaeda, and then they became much larger and more formidable. But what is the relationship with Al-Qaeda today?
Today, it is not a friendly one. They view Al-Qaeda's local affiliate, which is called Jabhat al-Nusra, as an enemy. And a lot of their propaganda is directed toward Muslims to convince them that ISIS or the Islamic State is the only legitimate bearer of the flag of Islam. You can see that, though, this split happening even back during the occupation. Zarqawi, the leader of ISIS's predecessor at the time, was pledged to Osama bin Laden. He was a card-carrying al-Qaeda member. But even back then, he was perpetrating attacks that were so grotesque, that were aimed at Shia civilians in ways that Al-Qaeda Central actually told him, cut it out, this is not going so well for us, and it's actually setting back our cause. So even back then, you could start seeing the splintering, and now that splintering is to the point where it's quite complete, and the two groups are fighting against each other.
So is there any prospect of a corporate merger between the two? And if so, what would be the result in terms of the threat to the West?
Well, right now, ISIS, the Islamic State, they're trying to pick up the smaller bits of Al-Qaeda that are in sort of ruins around the world. Al-Qaeda as a global organization, I think, is largely finished. The prospect of reconciliation between the local affiliate in Syria of Al-Qaeda, that's Jabhat al-Nusra, and ISIS, I think that is not likely to happen soon. Nusra has a very strong presence, especially in the western area of Syria and northwestern area of Syria. And I think ISIS would have a very difficult time digging them out of that territory and convincing them to essentially give allegiance to what's right now one of their main enemies.
Tell us about the ideology, Graham, of ISIS. President Obama refuses to call them Muslim militants. He says they're terrorists. Other representatives of the administration say they're just thugs. They don't want to dignify them by calling them Muslims. But isn't their ideology really rooted in Islam?
Yes, there's no question that they do derive their ultimate ideology from an interpretation of Islam, and not an ignorant one either. That they have what it must be said is a very minority view of Islam, but they're certainly coming out of the very long, diverse, even contradictory tradition that we call Islam. When the president has said in the past that they're not Islamic, I think what he has been doing is really saying something political, which is he's trying to assure our Muslim allies, Muslim Americans, that he and the U.S. government, they do not view Muslims in general as their enemies, and they don't view ISIS as the correct type of Islam. But the broader kind of claim that they're not Islamic, that they don't derive something from the Islamic tradition, I think is just demonstrably false. When he calls them terrorists, by the way, he's simply agreeing with them. That's what they call themselves. They don't consider this an insult. So on that one point, they're in complete agreement.
Now, of course, some have called them Salafist jihadists. Some have, notably Professor Bernard Haeckel of Princeton, whom I know you've read his writings and are familiar with his thinking, says that they are untamed Wahhabists. Could you explain that? Who are the Salafists and who are the Wahhabists, and what is their relationship to ISIS?
Well, the Wahhabists are the precursors of modern Saudi Arabia. Modern Saudi Arabia adopts Wahhabism as its official creed. In the 18th century, the Wahhabists were a group in what's now present-day Saudi Arabia who took as one of their main projects the leveling of graves, the destroying of anything that they considered an innovative practice within Islam. And this is closely tied with Salafism. Salafism is a movement that, in its most modern incarnation anyway, came into being in the late 19th century with a few figures who suggested that what Islam needed to do was to go back to its earliest days and to emulate this group that is known as the pious forefathers of Islam, that is the Prophet himself and his immediate companions. And that's a movement that has split and splintered in many ways along the way since then. But the two main groups are quietist Salafis, who say that what we should obey our leaders and we should focus on our personal religious commitments, our families, calling other people to Islam, but essentially be politically silent. and even if our leaders are demonstrably sinful. And then the other group is the Salafi jihadists. And these are the ones who think that we need to go back to those early predecessors, those early forefathers of Islam, and especially
in the Middle Ages.
We're talking about in the very earliest days. We're the 7th century, really.
Yes.
And they need to go. They believe by going to those predecessors and their example, we see that we have to have military conquest of Muslims who have fallen by the wayside, and of non-Muslim territories. And that's what we see in Al-Qaeda and in ISIS today.
So you wrote in The Atlantic, the reality is that the Islamic State is Islamic, very Islamic, and you adhere to that view.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. Everything that we've seen from the Islamic State so far indicates that it is led by people who have at least some education in Islam that goes to a fairly high level. They are well aware of Scripture. They use it for their purpose. They use it for purposes that most Muslims oppose, but there's no question they are very Islamic.
We've seen, coming from ISIS, horrific and certainly unparalleled brutality, and nothing like it seen in our lifetime. The beheadings, the burning of the Iraqi pilot, the mass executions. Maybe the Holocaust is the only analogy that might exist. What in their ideology authorizes them to acts of such terrific and horrific brutality?
So there are a few things to say about this. First is that, as you say, there is precedent for terrible mass murder. What's new about it is that, as you say, we have not seen it before. They are very eager to show us what they're doing and to have it seen in high definition. The second thing that we need to realize is, as I said previously, they consider themselves terrorists. They believe that it is a religious obligation to infuriate and to terrorize us. And so the reason they show us this brutality in such graphic detail is because they know the reaction. They know that there will be people like you and me who will be horrified by this, and they also know that there will be Muslims who will be divided by it.
Now, Professor Rakel says they principally target other Muslims for not following their version of Islam, the apostates. But they have beheaded American journalists, American aid workers, people from the West who happen to be in Syria, whom they kidnapped. What's the basis for that? Is that just sheer terrorism and trying to create attention for themselves?
It is. Haeckel's point really can't be stressed enough. The victims of ISIS have been overwhelmingly Muslims. ISIS is thrilled to be killing Muslims, and they don't consider them Muslims. They consider them apostates. So they consider anyone who doesn't follow certain core teachings that they believe in to be non-Muslims, and therefore first in line to be killed. In the case of the journalists, the aid workers who have been killed, in some cases they have concocted stories about who these people are. They've claimed that they're spies. They've claimed that they're agents of foreign governments. And they've also cited Scripture to say that if captives are taken, and if the governments or tribes of those captives don't give ransom money, then the fate of those captives is free for ISIS to dispose of.
Now let's talk for a moment about terrorism. I mean, we saw with Al-Qaeda that they've exported terrorism around the world. It even came to the United States. Are there ISIS fighters who have infiltrated other countries? I mean, it's been said that the recent bombing attack in Ankara was ISIS-sponsored. It's been some dispute as to whether the Charlie Hebdo attack in Paris in January was ISIS or Al-Qaeda, but certainly some have claimed that it was ISIS-sponsored. Are they likely to splinter off and export terrorism around the world, and particularly to the United States?
Well, look, I can guarantee that in the United States right now there are ISIS supporters, and there are ISIS supporters who believe that attacks on American civilians are blessed. The other thing that I can tell you with almost complete certainty is that anyone who looks at ISIS's propaganda, anyone who looks at the messages that ISIS is sending to those supporters, would have to realize that their main goal is to get those supporters not to attack here, but to come to ISIS territory. And I think that's an often overlooked aspect of ISIS's support base in Western Europe, in the United States, elsewhere, is that the message that they're getting relentlessly is it's your obligation to come to ISIS territory immediately. And only in the case where you're unable to do that is it permissible, are you obliged, in fact, to attack on site. And so the ISIS-affiliated attacks that we've already seen in the United States in particular are done by people who, to be frank, have not been high-functioning individuals. They've been the types who would have difficulty actually getting to ISIS territory. They don't have the money to do it. They don't have the social resources to do it. Anyone who does have that ability has tried to go buy an airline ticket one way to southern Turkey and cross the border already.
Now, we spoke before of the caliphate, and this is part of their apocalyptic vision, isn't it? Because they say the world is going to end before too long with, the eighth caliph, and Baghdadi is the sixth. The way they count, they eliminate the Turkish caliphs. There were 33 of them. But explain what the caliphate is and why is that central to their ideology?
It's a view of how politics works from within the Islamic tradition. What is a caliph? It comes from an Arabic word which means successor, khalifa, and it's a successor specifically to the Prophet Muhammad. And a caliph is supposed to be appointed by a kind of consensus of scholars, and this person is supposed to be the unquestioned leader of Muslims. ISIS believes that without a caliph, you cannot have a proper functioning, fully Islamic government. They say that the caliph, when he exists, when this institution is alive, then all sorts of obligations that were in abeyance through much of in our lifetimes, that these institutions suddenly revive. That is the paying of certain taxes, the implementation of certain kinds of punishment. So they think it's a really world historical event for a caliphate to be revived. Now, on the question of apocalypse, they have published an essay that tries to go through the caliphates of history and to identify the ones that have been truly righteous. And they do this because there is a tradition of the Prophet that says that there will be a finite number of caliphs, and they actually said they think it's 12. So by their count, and they admit that this is just their best guess, their guy currently ruling, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, also who rules as Caliph Ibrahim, might be number 7 or 8. So we have
a little time.
We have a little time. Depends on how many caliphs we run through with the airstrike.
Although he may have been seriously wounded in a recent Iraqi attack. His second command was killed, and it's said. So that might narrow the number that we have to go before the apocalypse.
Yes, it's a countdown that I'm sure they are minding.
Has, in your judgment, the Western response to all this been robust enough?
Well, I think the Western response has been measured in ways that, in many ways, I appreciate the caution that the West has approached with ISIS. As I said before,
I appreciate it means you like it or you understand it.
I understand it, and I think that the caution is well advised. As I said, if we wish to take out ISIS in its core territories, we could do that. It would be very, very easy to deprive them of territory, which for them would be a serious blow.
That would be the end of the caliphate. If the caliph doesn't have territory, there's no caliphate anymore.
There's no such thing as an underground caliph.
Yeah.
So if the caliph doesn't have the ability to implement law, then he ceases to be a caliph. So we could do that. The problem with that, and the reason why I think the caution is warranted, is that we would then inherit a situation that it's not clear we could really improve upon. As I said at the beginning, the reason the caliphate was able to spring into existence at all was because of the chaos following the Syrian civil war, and also the kind of misgovernment of Sunni territories by the Iraqi government. Are we prepared to step in and govern those territories any better? Are we prepared to stop the Syrian civil war? I'm not sure these things are really within our capabilities to manage. And if we can't do that, then we might, as soon as we leave, see another caliphate just spring up in the place of the one that we displaced.
So you think it might even play into their hand if we sent 100,000 troops there to put down the caliphate?
Yes, in some ways it would, some ways it would not. First of all, it would be a really exciting thing for them to be facing U.S. Marines.
That's what they want.
That's what they have in their propaganda. That's what their supporters are anxiously looking forward to. They can't wait to have the first captured American soldier.
And behead him.
And behead him in the most public, grotesque way. He'd be lucky if he were beheaded. I think it would be more likely he'd be burned to death or something like that.
Lucky if he were beheaded. Sadly, Graham, we've run out of time. We've covered a lot of ground, and this has been just wonderful. So I have a question for you, and the question is, does ISIS want world domination?
It does.
It does.
There's no question about that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming by.
Thanks.
And thank you for coming by. Tune in next week for more conversations in the digital age. Please visit our website at www.digitalage.org. I'm Jim Zirin. All the best.